John Gotti was once the most powerful mob boss in America. He ruled the Gambino crime family with an iron fist. People called him the Dapper Don because of his fancy suits. He loved the spotlight and fame, but his reign wouldn't last forever. In 1992, Gotti's luck ran out. The FBI finally caught up with him. They had tapes of him talking about crimes. His own people turned against him. The trial was quick. The jury found him guilty of murder and racketeering. The judge sentenced Gotti to life in prison. No chance of parole. The man who once controlled New York was now just another inmate. His power was gone in an instant. Gotti's first days in prison were a harsh wake-up call. He arrived at the Marion Federal Penitentiary in Illinois. It was one of the toughest prisons in America. Gone were his silk suits and fine dining. He now wore a plain prison jumpsuit. His meals came on plastic trays. The cell was tiny, just 6 feet by 8 feet. It had a small bed, a toilet, and a sink. This was now Gotti's home. He couldn't believe how far he had fallen. The man who once had a mansion now lived in a box. Guards watched Gotti's every move. He had no privacy. Cameras recorded him 24 hours a day. He couldn't even go to the bathroom without someone knowing. The once powerful boss was now powerless. Gotti's days in prison followed a strict routine. He woke up at 6 a.m. to the sound of guards yelling, no more sleeping in on silk sheets. He had to make his bed military style. One wrinkle meant punishment. Then came a quick shower with other inmates, no privacy, no hot water. Breakfast was at 7 a.m. It was always the same bland oatmeal and weak coffee. Gotti, once used to gourmet meals, now ate like everyone else. After breakfast, he had work duty. He mopped floors or did laundry. The boss who never lifted a finger now scrubbed toilets. Lunch was at noon. Another tasteless meal on a plastic tray. Then more work or time in the yard. But Gotti couldn't enjoy it. Other inmates wanted to hurt him. He had to watch his back constantly. Gotti faced extreme isolation in prison. The guards kept him away from other inmates. They feared he might try to run things from inside. So Gotti spent 23 hours a day in his cell. He only got 1 hour for exercise. Even then, he was alone in a small cage. The loneliness was crushing. Gotti was a social man. He loved being around people. Now he had no one to talk to, no friends, no family, no underlings, just the occasional guard who ignored him. The silence was deafening. He started talking to himself just to hear a voice. Holidays were the worst. Gotti thought of his family celebrating without him. He missed his wife's cooking. He missed watching his grandkids open presents. Instead, he sat alone in his cell. Prison life took a severe toll on Gotti's health, both physically and mentally. The stress and poor conditions of his confinement wore him down relentlessly. Over time, he developed high blood pressure and diabetes, conditions that were poorly managed in prison. The prison diet, consisting mostly of fatty, salty foods, made things worse for his health. Exercise was limited to a small enclosed yard, offering little relief or improvement to his deteriorating condition. His once fit and robust body became weak and sickly, a shadow of his former self. In 1998, doctors diagnosed Gotti with throat cancer. The treatment was brutal and unforgiving. He underwent surgery and radiation therapy, but the cancer was relentless. Despite the treatments, the cancer kept coming back. Gotti lost a significant amount of weight. His voice, once strong and commanding, was reduced to a mere whisper, barely audible. He could barely eat or drink, making his condition even more dire. The mighty boss, who once commanded respect and fear, was now frail and weak. The prison healthcare facilities were basic at best, inadequate for someone with his severe health issues. Gotti didn't receive the comprehensive care he desperately needed. He had to fight for every doctor visit, and pain medication was limited, causing him to suffer greatly. The man who once had access to the best doctors and medical care now relied on the limited skills of prison medics, a stark contrast to his former life. Gotti's power vanished behind bars. The once feared mob boss found himself in a world where his influence meant nothing. He could no longer control the Gambino family. The iron grip he once had over New York's underworld was now a distant memory. His son John Jr. tried to take over. He attempted to fill the void left by his father's incarceration, but he wasn't as smart or ruthless as his father. The younger Gotti struggled to maintain the family's dominance. The family fell into chaos. Other mobsters grabbed territory. Rival factions saw an opportunity to seize power. Gotti could only watch helplessly from his cell. The empire he built was crumbling before his eyes. The FBI kept a close eye on Gotti. They were determined to ensure he had no chance of regaining control. They monitored his visits and phone calls. Every interaction was scrutinized. He couldn't give orders or make plans. His ability to communicate with the outside world was severely restricted. Every word he said was recorded. The authorities left no stone unturned. His influence in the outside world faded. The once mighty Gotti was now a shadow of his former self. The man who once ruled New York was now powerless. His reign had come to an unceremonious end. It was a bitter pill to swallow. Gotti's reputation also suffered. The invincible image he had cultivated was tarnished. Former friends turned against him. Loyalty was a rare commodity in the world of organized crime. They made deals with the government. In exchange for leniency, they provided valuable information. They told secrets Gotti had kept for years. The courtroom became a stage for betrayal and revelation. His image as the Teflon Don was shattered. The man who once seemed untouchable was now exposed. Now he was just another convicted criminal. The legend of John Gotti had been reduced to a cautionary tale. Gotti's family visits were rare and difficult. The prison was far from New York. His wife Victoria could only come a few times a year. The visits were short and closely watched. They couldn't touch or hug. They talked through glass. It was hard for Gotti to see his family this way. His children also visited when they could. But it was painful for them. They saw their father grow old and sick. Gotti tried to stay strong for them. He didn't want them to see him weak. But it was clear he was suffering. The visits always ended too soon. Letters became Gotti's main link to his family. He wrote often. He asked about grandchildren and family events. But the letters were all read by prison staff. Gotti had to be careful what he wrote. Prison life crushed Gotti's spirit. He fell into deep depression. The man once known for his confidence now felt hopeless. He spent hours staring at the wall. Sometimes he refused to eat or talk. Guards had to watch him for signs of suicide. It was a dramatic change for the once vibrant boss. Gotti started to regret his life choices. He thought about all the people he had hurt, all the families he had destroyed. He realized his actions had consequences, not just for him, but for everyone around him. The guilt ate at him day and night. He couldn't escape his past. Nightmares plagued Gotti's sleep. He dreamed of his victims, of the life he could have had. He woke up sweating and scared. The tough guy image was gone. In its place was a broken, remorseful man. Even in prison, Gotti fought legal battles. He appealed his conviction many times. He claimed the trial was unfair, that witnesses lied. But every appeal failed. The court saw through his arguments. Gotti's lawyers worked hard, but it was useless. He was stuck in prison for life. Gotti also faced new charges. Prosecutors said he was still running the mob from prison. They had tapes of him talking to visitors. Gotti denied everything. But it was clear he couldn't stay out of trouble. Even behind bars, he couldn't let go of his criminal life. The constant legal fights drained Gotti's energy and money. His family spent millions on lawyers, but nothing changed. Gotti remained in prison. As Gotti's health worsened, he faced his mortality. The cancer was winning. The once formidable mob boss was now a shadow of his former self, confined to a hospital bed, battling a relentless disease that showed no mercy. He could barely eat or speak. His weight dropped dramatically. The man who once commanded respect and fear could now hardly muster the strength to lift a spoon to his mouth. Doctors gave him only months to live. The prognosis was grim, and there was no hope for recovery. Each day was a struggle, a painful reminder of his impending end. Gotti knew his time was running out. He spent long hours in his cell, contemplating his life, his choices, and the legacy he would leave behind. He tried to make peace with his fate. Solitude gave him time to reflect, to think about the empire he built and the lives he affected. Gotti's family fought for compassionate release. They believed he deserved to spend his final moments surrounded by loved ones, not in the cold confines of a prison. They wanted him to die at home. But the government refused. The authorities were unyielding, citing the danger he still posed. They said Gotti was still a threat. Despite his frail condition, they believed his influence remained a risk to society. So he spent his final days in a prison hospital. The sterile environment was a stark contrast to the opulence he once enjoyed. It was a far cry from the luxurious life he once lived. The man who once dined in the finest restaurants now lay in a stark, clinical room. The dapper Don was now just a sick old man. The transformation was complete. The powerful mob boss had become a frail, vulnerable patient. In his last weeks, Gotti reflected on his life. He thought about the choices he made, the people he hurt, and the empire he built. He told his family he was sorry. In rare moments of vulnerability, he expressed regret for the pain he caused them. For the pain he caused them. His family, torn between love and hurt, listened as he sought their forgiveness. For the choices he made. He knew that his decisions had far-reaching consequences, affecting not just his life but the lives of those he loved. He knew he couldn't change the past. The photographs were a painful reminder of what once was and what could never be again. But he hoped they would remember the good times. In his final moments, he clung to the hope that his family would cherish the happier memories, despite the pain he had caused. After Gotti's death, people debated his legacy. Some saw him as the last great mob boss. Others called him a murderer and thug. His family tried to protect his memory. But the truth was complicated. Gotti was both charming and brutal, a family man and a killer. His life was full of contradictions. Gotti's story became a warning to others. It showed how the mob life always ends badly, in prison or in death. Young gangsters saw Gotti's fate and thought twice. The glamour of the mafia life faded. Gotti's fall from power was a turning point for organized crime. Books and movies told Gotti's story. Some glorified him, others showed the harsh reality. But all agreed on one thing. Gotti's life in prison was miserable. It was a stark contrast to his years of power.